He was a man who had grown used to quiet mornings. Every day he woke up before the sun, not because he had to, but because it had become a habit over the years. His apartment was small, tidy, and simple, filled with the things that mattered most. His child's drawings on the fridge, a few books stacked neatly by the couch, and an old piano tucked into the corner of the living room. The piano had seen better days. His keys were slightly worn, some of the black ones chipped, but to him it was perfect. It had been a part of his life for as long as he could remember. He had learned to play it in his teenage years, and though life had pulled him in many directions, the music had always stayed. Being a single parent was not easy. Every day was a careful balance between work, household chores, and the little moments he could steal to be present with his child. His child was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to explore everything. The two of them shared a quiet understanding, a bond that had only grown stronger after the absence of another parent. There were times when exhaustion weighed heavily on him, when the responsibilities seemed too many, and he wondered if he was doing enough. But then there were moments that reminded him why it was all worth it. A smile, a laugh, a hug that lasted just a little too long. Mornings were special for both of them. After getting breakfast ready, he would often sit at the piano for a few minutes before the day truly began. It was his way of centering himself, of releasing tension and gathering energy for the hours ahead. Sometimes his child would join him, tapping the keys and laughing at the funny sounds they could make together. Those moments were small, but they were treasures in a life that often felt rushed. On this particular day, he had a little extra energy. Perhaps it was because of the anticipation of the community event later, or maybe it was just one of those mornings where everything felt lighter. He carefully straightened the small table in the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and made sure his child had everything they needed for school. Even in these ordinary routines, there was a sense of purpose. Each small act of care was a reminder of his dedication, a way to show love without needing words. As he prepared to leave, he glanced at the piano, its polished surface reflecting the morning light. There was a quiet smile on his face. He often thought about how music had been his companion through difficult times, how it had given him comfort when words failed. The piano was more than just an instrument. It was a keeper of memories, of emotions too deep to speak aloud. And though he had not performed in front of anyone for years, the thought of sharing a piece of that with others sometimes lingered in the back of his mind. After dropping his child off at school, he headed to the community hall where the local talent show was being set up. His role was simple: help organize the space, make sure everything was clean, and assist with preparations wherever needed. It was not glamorous work, but he didn't mind. He liked being useful, and he enjoyed the quiet behind-the-scenes moments where he could observe without pressure. The hall was bustling with activity. Chairs being arranged, microphones tested, and people rehearsing nervously. He quietly joined in, moving tables, sweeping the stage, and adjusting the piano bench just so. In these small actions, he found a rhythm, a comfort in knowing that he was contributing in his own meaningful way. While he worked, he noticed the other performers practicing. There were children singing with shy confidence, teenagers nervously plucking at guitar strings, and adults performing pieces they had spent months preparing. Each performance carried its own story, its own struggle and triumph. He watched quietly, feeling a mixture of admiration and nostalgia. Memories of his own performances, long ago, before life had become so complicated, floated into his mind. The applause, the nerves, the thrill of connecting with an audience through music, it all came rushing back. He didn't feel jealous or envious, just a gentle longing for the familiar comfort of those moments. Time passed quickly as he moved around the hall, helping wherever he could. He adjusted the lights, carried water bottles, and even helped a young girl straighten her sheet music. Each interaction, though small, reminded him of the importance of community and connection. People often overlooked the quiet helpers, the ones who worked without recognition, but he found satisfaction in being needed and in seeing the event come together smoothly. By mid-morning, the hall was nearly ready. He paused for a moment to catch his breath and leaned against the piano. His fingers lightly brushed over the keys, and a soft, almost hesitant note filled the room. It was instinctive, automatic. The sound seemed to echo in the empty space, a gentle reminder of the music that had always been a part of him. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the notes guide his thoughts, feeling the familiar comfort of the melody. It was a private moment, unnoticed by anyone else, but it was enough to lift his spirits and quiet the lingering stress of the day. His child's encouragement came to mind. Often, it was the simplest words that mattered most. "You sound amazing, Dad." Those words had a way of breaking through doubt, of reminding him that his music had value, even if it was just for a few people in a living room or a quiet hall. Music was a gift, and he cherished the moments when he could share it, even in small ways. As the other performers continued to rehearse, he found himself humming a tune, tapping a rhythm with his fingers, and smiling at the thought of how much joy music could bring. He thought about the community, the shared experiences, and the potential for moments that could touch hearts in ways words never could. Little did he know that today would present one of those moments. Not planned, not rehearsed, but deeply real and profoundly moving. The stage he had been tidying would soon become the place where he could express himself fully, and the music that had been his private companion for years would speak to an audience in a way he had never imagined. The day was unfolding like any other, yet there was an underlying sense that something special was about to happen. In the quiet spaces between tasks, between sweeping and arranging, he felt a gentle anticipation, a subtle energy that hinted at the extraordinary. And as he continued his work, moving through the hall with steady hands and a calm heart, the seeds of an unforgettable moment were quietly being sown, waiting for the right time to bloom in the form of a performance that would touch everyone who heard it. The community hall was alive with energy. People were rushing back and forth, arranging chairs, setting up microphones, and moving instruments onto the stage. The air was filled with the sound of footsteps, laughter, and occasional nervous whispers. The single dad continued his quiet work, moving among the crowd without drawing attention to himself. He adjusted the stage curtains, swept stray dust from the floor, and made sure every chair was perfectly aligned. To him, these small actions mattered because he knew that a clean and organized space could help performers feel calm and ready. As he worked, he glanced around the hall, observing the other performers. There were children dressed in bright colors, their faces full of excitement and nerves. Some clutched their sheet music tightly, their fingers trembling slightly. Teenagers practiced scales on guitars and keyboards, their concentration intense. Adults rehearsed their pieces with quiet focus, each lost in their own world of music. The dad admired all of them silently. Each person had their own story, their own struggles, and their own reasons for being there. It reminded him that music was a universal language, capable of connecting people in ways nothing else could. He paused by the piano, brushing his fingers over the keys. Even though he was meant to be helping, he couldn't resist the familiar pull of the instrument. It felt alive beneath his fingertips, and he let out a soft, almost unconscious melody. No one was paying attention, and that was just how he liked it. Music was personal, intimate, and sometimes it was enough to simply hear it for himself. He remembered long hours spent practicing as a teenager, the joy of discovering new melodies, and the comfort of losing himself in a song. These memories made him smile quietly, and he felt a gentle warmth spread through him. Suddenly, a small commotion near the stage caught his attention. One of the young performers had misplaced a page of sheet music and was panicking quietly. Without hesitation, the dad walked over, crouched down, and offered a reassuring hand. He helped her find the missing page and straightened it on the music stand. Her eyes lit up with relief and gratitude, and she gave him a small, shy smile. It was a simple interaction, but it reminded him why he loved being part of moments like these. Helping others, even in the smallest ways, brought its own quiet satisfaction. The hall continued to fill with people. Parents, friends, and neighbors were arriving, bringing energy and excitement with them. Conversations buzzed, laughter echoed off the walls, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. The dad moved back to the piano, adjusting the bench and making sure it was stable for the upcoming performances. Even though he was behind the scenes, he felt a connection to the stage, as if he were part of the magic that was about to happen. The piano was ready, the lights were set, and the performers were preparing themselves for the moment they would share with the audience. He noticed a few performers pacing nervously backstage. One young girl was muttering to herself, trying to remember her lines. A teenager was running scales quickly, trying to perfect a tricky passage. An older man was quietly humming, focusing on the rhythm of his piece. Each of them had a unique way of coping with nerves, and the dad understood completely. He had been there himself many years ago, feeling the same mix of excitement and fear. Watching them, he felt a sense of camaraderie, a quiet connection between anyone who dared to step onto a stage and share their passion. As the event approached, the hall became more crowded. People found their seats, chatting quietly and waiting for the show to begin. The dad continued his work, ensuring that the space was clean and welcoming. He moved chairs, straightened programs, and adjusted the microphones. Each action, though small, helped create an environment where performers could feel safe and focused. The energy in the room was growing, a mixture of anticipation, excitement, and the unspoken understanding that something special was about to happen. Backstage, he noticed one of the organizers looking stressed. They were trying to coordinate performers, manage timing, and handle last-minute details. The dad quietly offered to help, carrying instruments and setting up stands. The organizer smiled gratefully, relieved to have another set of hands. In these moments, he felt a sense of purpose, knowing that even small actions could make a big difference in the smooth running of the event. The hall was a hive of activity, and he moved through it with quiet efficiency, unnoticed but essential. At one point, he paused and leaned against the piano, letting his fingers brush the keys lightly. A soft, gentle melody filled the hall, and for a moment, the noise of preparation seemed to fade. It was instinctive, almost automatic, and it reminded him of why he loved music so much. The notes were simple, but they carried a sense of calm and reassurance. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining the audience and the performers, and felt a quiet thrill at the thought of sharing music, even in the smallest way. As the start time approached, performers began taking their places on stage. Children held their instruments tightly, teenagers adjusted their stands, and adults took deep breaths, centering themselves. The dad continued to tidy and adjust things, but he couldn't help noticing the nervous energy in the room. Everyone was preparing, readying themselves for the moment when they would step into the spotlight. The atmosphere was electric, full of hope, excitement, and the possibility of something memorable happening. The event organizer stepped to the front of the hall, microphone in hand, and welcomed everyone. Applause echoed through the room as the first performers began their pieces. The dad watched quietly from the side, helping with small tasks and observing the audience's reactions. The children performed with enthusiasm, their voices bright and clear. The teenagers showed skill and dedication, their music reflecting months of practice. Each performance was unique, carrying its own story and emotion. He felt a quiet pride in being part of the environment that allowed these moments to unfold. During a brief pause between performances, the dad noticed the piano sitting quietly, waiting for someone to play. He felt a familiar tug in his chest, a gentle nudge reminding him of the music he had carried with him for years. It was still early, and no one was paying attention to him. The thought crossed his mind that perhaps, just for a moment, he could share a piece of himself through the piano. It was a tempting idea, one he hadn't seriously considered in a long time. He shook his head slightly, focusing on his current task, but the feeling lingered, a quiet spark of possibility. As the program continued, the dad moved seamlessly between helping performers and preparing the stage. He carried water, adjusted microphones, and offered words of encouragement when needed. Each interaction was small, but meaningful. The audience laughed at the children's jokes, clapped politely, and listened intently to each performance. The energy in the room was growing, a shared excitement that came from witnessing talent, effort, and passion. The dad felt connected to it all, a quiet participant in the unfolding story of the day. By mid-morning, the stage was fully prepared, and the performers were taking their positions. The audience was engaged, anticipating the next piece. The dad continued his work, moving chairs, adjusting instruments, and ensuring that everything was in place. His movements were steady and purposeful, reflecting years of experience in managing responsibilities quietly and efficiently. Even in the background, he felt a sense of importance, knowing that his actions contributed to the smooth running of the event. During a brief lull, he allowed himself a moment to play a few soft notes on the piano. The sound was gentle, filling the hall with a calming presence. Performers backstage paused to listen, smiles appearing on their faces. Even the organizers looked up, pleasantly surprised by the unexpected music. It was a simple melody, but it carried warmth, comfort, and a quiet beauty. In that moment, the dad felt a deep connection to the room, to the people, and to the music that had been his companion for so long. The day continued, each performance adding to the atmosphere of joy, excitement, and emotional connection. The dad moved through the hall, helping, observing, and occasionally letting the piano sing under his fingers. He felt a growing sense of anticipation, a subtle understanding that something unexpected might happen. The stage he had been tidying was no longer just a place for others. It was a space full of possibility, waiting for the right moment to come alive with music that could touch hearts in ways words never could. And quietly, patiently, he continued his work, ready for whatever the day might bring. The dad had been moving through the hall all morning, helping performers and tidying the stage, when a small unexpected problem arose. One of the scheduled performers had fallen ill and could not go on stage. There was a brief moment of confusion backstage, with organizers whispering and trying to figure out a solution. He watched quietly, helping where he could, but a tiny spark of thought started to form in his mind. The piano, which had been sitting silently, suddenly seemed to call to him. Its keys glimmered under the stage lights, waiting for someone to play. He shook the idea away at first, telling himself he was only there to help. But the feeling lingered, growing stronger. He glanced at his child, who was nervously fidgeting nearby. Their wide eyes seemed to look right through him, and he saw a silent question there. Could he, even for a moment, share his music with everyone? The thought was tempting. He hadn't performed in public for years, not since life had become so busy and responsibilities had piled up. But this moment felt different. The room was already buzzing with excitement. The audience settled in their seats, and the other performers were ready. He knew that if he played, even for a short time, it would be a gift, not for recognition but for the sheer joy of sharing music. He bent down to adjust the piano bench, sitting carefully, trying to calm his racing heart. The keys were cool beneath his fingers, familiar and comforting. He took a deep breath, letting the sounds of the hall and the whispers of the audience fade into the background. For a moment it was just him, the piano, and the music. He closed his eyes briefly, remembering all the hours he had spent practicing alone, the melodies that had become second nature, the songs that had carried him through both joy and sorrow. It was a private history, a collection of emotions that had never left him. The organizers were still trying to figure out what to do. The young performers backstage looked uncertain, some glancing at him with curiosity. A quiet voice from the side called out, suggesting gently that maybe he could play something simple to fill the gap. His heart skipped a beat. Could he really do it? The thought of stepping into the spotlight, of sharing this private part of himself, made him nervous. But he also felt a quiet courage rising within him. The audience was ready, the stage was set, and the piano seemed to invite him forward. He could do this. He had to do this. He placed his fingers lightly on the keys, letting the first soft notes fill the hall. They were hesitant at first, unsure, but each note gained confidence, and a gentle melody began to emerge. The audience, curious at first, started to listen. There were whispers of surprise as people realized that someone was performing who had not been scheduled. The dad did not notice. His mind was fully absorbed in the music, in the way each note carried emotion, in the way the melody could speak when words could not. He played a simple tune at first, familiar and warm, the kind of music that drew people in without overwhelming them. It was not about showing skill or impressing anyone. It was about connecting, about expressing what he had felt for years in private moments. His child watched from the side of the stage, eyes wide with awe and pride. Seeing their parent perform, seeing the joy and passion on his face, filled them with a quiet happiness. They could sense the depth of feeling behind each note, the story being told through music. As the melody continued, the dad began to experiment a little, letting the music flow naturally. The notes grew richer, more expressive. There was a gentle rise and fall, a rhythm that seemed to capture both the struggles and the joys of his life. The audience sat in rapt attention, listening to a performance they had not expected, drawn into the emotional journey the music conveyed. Some people had tears in their eyes, moved by the authenticity and beauty of the performance. It was a moment of shared humanity, a connection between performer and listener that needed no explanation. The dad felt a strange mix of emotions as he played. There was fear, of course, the natural anxiety of performing in front of strangers. But there was also a deep joy, a release of emotions he had carried for too long. Each note was a word, each chord a sentence, telling a story of life, love, and resilience. The audience could feel it too. They responded not with polite applause, but with a quiet reverence, a recognition of the honesty in the music. As he continued, he noticed subtle reactions from the people around him. A young girl in the front row covered her mouth in awe. An elderly man nodded, eyes closed, remembering his own past. Parents glanced at each other, sharing silent smiles. The dad was no longer just filling a gap in the schedule. He was creating a moment that touched everyone in the hall. It was spontaneous, unplanned, yet it carried a power that only genuine expression can create. His child's face was glowing with pride. They had always known their parent was talented, but seeing it in action, watching the music come alive under his hands, was something extraordinary. They could feel the emotion radiating from each note, the love and care that went into every moment. For them, it was more than a performance. It was a revelation of the person they admired most. Time seemed to stretch as he continued playing. The music was alive, responding to the mood of the room, to the unspoken emotions of the audience. He felt a rhythm that was both internal and external, a flow that carried him along effortlessly. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of his heart, a channel through which he could communicate with everyone present. It was a rare, beautiful feeling, one that made all the years of practice, struggle, and quiet dedication worth it. Every so often, he glanced at the audience, noticing the subtle signs of impact. Some people had tears quietly running down their cheeks. Others were smiling softly, eyes reflecting a deep connection to the music. He did not need to look for applause or approval. The reaction in the room was enough. He could feel the shared emotion, the silent acknowledgement that music had a power beyond words, a power to move hearts and souls. The melody shifted slightly, becoming more expressive, more personal. He played a piece he had written years ago, one that had never been shared. It was a reflection of his life as a single parent, of the joys and challenges, the quiet triumphs and the small victories. Each note carried memory and meaning, and the audience could feel it. They were experiencing not just a performance, but a story, a glimpse into the life of someone who had persevered and loved deeply despite the odds. The dad was lost in the music. The hall around him faded into the background. There was only the piano, the melody, and the connection he felt with everyone listening. It was a transformative moment, one that would be remembered long after the event ended. He could sense the energy of the audience, their collective breath held in awe and appreciation. And in that moment, he realized that he had found something precious, the ability to express himself fully, honestly, and powerfully. As the final notes rang out, there was a brief silence. It was the kind of silence that speaks volumes, filled with emotion and reflection. Then, slowly, the audience began to clap. The applause grew, filling the hall with warmth and admiration. The dad opened his eyes, smiling softly, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and pride. He looked at his child, who was beaming, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had stepped out of the shadows, embraced the moment, and shared something truly meaningful. Backstage, the organizers were astonished, as were the other performers. They approached him with congratulations and gratitude, amazed at the unexpected performance. People from the audience came forward, thanking him, sharing how moved they had been. The dad felt humbled, touched, and a little overwhelmed. It was not about fame or recognition, but about the connection, the shared experience, and the joy of music. In that moment, he realized that sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones that come from the heart, unplanned and sincere. As he left the stage, his child took his hand, whispering how proud they were. The dad smiled, feeling a quiet happiness that no words could fully capture. He had shared a piece of himself, and it had been received with love, understanding, and appreciation. The moment would stay with him forever, a memory of courage, connection, and the magic of music. And though the day was far from over, he knew that something extraordinary had already happened. A single dad, simply tidying a stage, had touched hearts in a way he never imagined possible. As the soft applause settled, the dad remained seated at the piano, letting the sound of the audience's reaction sink in. He took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. The first piece had been simple, just enough to capture attention and ease into the performance. Now, with the hall listening and the warmth of encouragement all around him, he felt ready to dive deeper, to play with more feeling, and to let the music flow freely. He glanced at his child, who smiled up at him, eyes shining with pride and anticipation. That smile gave him courage. He began the next piece, a melody that had been with him for many years, one that held memories of both joy and hardship. The notes came easily at first, almost tentative, but then he found the rhythm, the pulse of the music, and it carried him along. Each key he pressed seemed to tell a story. The struggles of balancing life as a single parent, the quiet victories in small daily routines, the moments of laughter shared with his child. The audience leaned in, sensing the sincerity behind each note. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others whispered to the people beside them, sharing their amazement. He felt the hall respond to him. The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to genuine engagement. People were no longer simply watching a performance. They were experiencing it. The melody rose and fell, carrying emotion in its flow, from gentle softness to powerful crescendos. The dad's fingers moved across the keys with confidence and ease, each chord connecting him to the hearts of those who listened. It was a moment of pure expression, one where time seemed to slow, where nothing else mattered but the music. Occasionally, he glanced at his child, who was completely captivated. Their small hand covered their mouth in awe, eyes wide as they watched their parent pour emotion into the piano. He felt a swell of pride and love, realizing that this performance was not just for the audience but also a gift to his child, a demonstration of courage, talent, and the beauty of following one's passion despite life's challenges. In that moment, he was not just a dad. He was a storyteller, a musician, and a source of inspiration. The melody continued, growing more complex and expressive. He added subtle flourishes, delicate pauses, and gentle swells, each element carefully chosen to convey emotion. The audience could feel the honesty and depth in every note. Some had tears glistening in their eyes, moved by the raw authenticity of the performance. Others smiled quietly, touched by the simplicity and sincerity of the music. The hall, once filled with the noise of preparation and chatter, was now silent, united in a shared experience of emotion and artistry. He played a passage that had been a personal favorite for years, a sequence of notes that reminded him of quiet nights with his child, reading stories and sharing small moments of joy. He thought of the days when life had been more difficult, when money was tight and time seemed short. Music had always been a refuge, a way to express feelings that were otherwise too deep to speak aloud. Now he was sharing that refuge with everyone in the room, inviting them into his world, and the connection was palpable. The audience responded subtly but powerfully. A woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, whispering softly to her companion about how moving the performance was. A young man in the back sat upright, completely focused, nodding to himself as he absorbed the music. Children leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the way the notes seemed to dance and tell a story. It was clear that this performance was more than just a song. It was a bridge between the performer and every listener, a shared emotional journey. The dad's confidence grew as he played. He felt the music flowing through him naturally, as if the piano and his emotions were one. He was no longer just filling a gap in the program. He was creating a moment that mattered, one that would linger in the memories of those who heard it. He added a few improvisations, small personal touches that made the piece unique, yet he never strayed from the heartfelt core of the melody. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, and every chord carried weight. Occasionally, he would glance at the audience, noticing the subtle reactions. Some people were wiping away tears, others were leaning back, eyes closed, fully immersed. He felt a quiet thrill at the realization that music had the power to connect, to evoke emotion, and to unite people in a shared experience. He thought about all the moments he had practiced alone, wondering if anyone would ever hear the pieces he had kept for himself. Now, not only were they hearing them, but they were feeling them, understanding the emotions behind every note. The piece built to a gentle crescendo, a soft rise that pulled the audience into its embrace. He let his fingers linger on certain keys, holding the notes to emphasize the emotion. It was a delicate balance between technique and feeling, and he navigated it with skill and intuition. He thought about the struggles he had overcome, the nights spent working hard to provide for his child, the quiet moments of doubt and exhaustion. Every challenge, every small victory had led him to this moment. And now he could share that journey through music. The melody shifted again, softening, becoming tender and reflective. He allowed himself to play with vulnerability, exposing the quieter, more delicate aspects of his emotions. The audience responded instinctively, leaning in, holding their breath, completely captivated. The room felt alive with connection, each person feeling as if the music was speaking directly to them. It was a rare and beautiful experience, one that transcended words, leaving only emotion and understanding. As he played, he noticed that his child was holding back tears, overwhelmed with pride and love. He felt a surge of emotion himself, the kind that comes from doing something deeply meaningful, something that touches the hearts of others while also fulfilling a personal need. The connection between father and child was palpable, a silent understanding that this moment would be remembered forever. It was a performance born from love, courage, and authenticity, and it shone through every note. The dad's performance began to draw more attention from the audience. People whispered to each other, sharing their astonishment and appreciation. Some had their phones out, quietly capturing the moment, while others simply sat, wanting to absorb every detail. The hall was alive with quiet energy, the kind that comes from experiencing something genuine and heartfelt. He was no longer just playing the piano. He was telling a story, one that transcended the stage and reached into the hearts of every listener. He played a passage that soared with emotion, a blend of strength and tenderness. The music reflected the journey of his life, the balance between struggle and joy, the quiet victories, and the moments of love that made it all worthwhile. Each chord resonated deeply, echoing through the hall and touching everyone present. The audience was completely engaged, responding with subtle movements, quiet gasps, and gentle smiles, all reflecting the impact of his performance. As the final notes approached, he slowed, allowing each sound to linger, giving the audience time to feel its weight. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the music carry him, and for a moment, there was complete stillness. Then, the final note faded, leaving the hall in silence. It was a silence filled with emotion, reflection, and awe. People absorbed what they had just witnessed, moved by the depth, authenticity, and beauty of the performance. The dad opened his eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. He looked at his child, who was beaming, unable to contain their excitement and admiration. The audience began to clap, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Some stood, unable to resist the urge to show appreciation. The applause was not just for the technical skill, but for the emotion, courage, and sincerity that had come through every note. He felt humbled, grateful, and deeply satisfied, knowing that he had shared a piece of himself that resonated with so many. Backstage, organizers and performers alike approached him, offering congratulations and expressing amazement. The dad smiled quietly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He had stepped out of the background, embraced the moment, and created an experience that touched hearts. And though the event would continue with other performances, this moment, born from a simple act of courage, would remain unforgettable. The music had spoken, and it had been heard, appreciated, and felt by all present, leaving a lasting impression on the hearts of everyone in the hall. The dad remained at the piano, letting the energy of the hall guide his fingers. He could feel the emotions of the audience, their focus, and their quiet anticipation. The melody he played was no longer just music. It was a reflection of his life, a story unfolding in real time. Each note carried the weight of years of struggle, moments of joy, and the quiet love he felt for his child. He was aware of the deep connection forming in the room, and it gave him courage to play with more emotion, more depth than he ever had before. He began a new section, one that built gradually, like a wave rising from the horizon. The melody grew richer, more expressive, carrying with it a sense of hope and resilience. The audience was spellbound, some leaning forward in their seats, others closing their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the sound. Every key he pressed was deliberate, every chord resonant, and every pause intentional. It was a story told without words, yet every listener understood the narrative unfolding before them. He thought of the many late nights spent practicing alone, the quiet moments when music had been his refuge from worry and fatigue. All of that experience now flowed naturally through his hands, giving life to a performance that was honest, powerful, and deeply personal. His fingers moved with fluidity, guided by both skill and emotion. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just pure expression. The piano seemed to respond to him, resonating with the depth of feeling he poured into it. The hall was silent except for the music. People were holding their breath, completely absorbed in the performance. Tears formed in the eyes of several audience members, while others smiled softly, touched by the sincerity and beauty of the music. The dad felt a surge of emotion himself, but he allowed it to fuel the performance rather than distract him. He was telling his story, and he could sense that everyone in the room was listening, feeling, and understanding. The melody began to climb, building tension and excitement. It was a delicate balance between strength and vulnerability, a reflection of his journey as a single parent, of the challenges he had overcome, and the small victories that had kept him going. He played with intention, letting the music convey feelings that words never could. The audience was completely captivated, hanging on every note, responding to the passion and authenticity that radiated from his performance. He noticed subtle reactions around the hall. A young girl clasped her hands together, eyes shining with emotion. An elderly couple exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging the beauty of the moment. Parents in the audience seemed to relate deeply to the feelings expressed through the music, and children were mesmerized by the way the melody moved effortlessly through the room. The connection between performer and listener was palpable, a shared experience that transcended age, background, and circumstance. The dad continued, letting the music rise to a powerful crescendo. His fingers flew across the keys with confidence and grace, each note carrying emotion, each chord telling a piece of his story. The performance had become more than just a display of skill. It was a journey, a powerful expression of life, love, and resilience. The audience was moved to tears, smiles, and quiet awe, fully immersed in the story being told through sound. He paused for a brief moment, letting a single note linger in the air. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion, and he could feel the audience holding their breath, waiting for the next sound. Then he continued, transitioning into a softer, more reflective section. The melody became tender, intimate, and vulnerable. He thought of his child, the small moments of connection and love that had defined their life together. Each note was a tribute to the bond they shared, a way to express feelings too deep for words. The audience was completely absorbed. Some had tears quietly rolling down their cheeks, others had smiles of admiration, and everyone was captivated by the authenticity of the performance. The dad could feel their hearts responding to the music, and it filled him with a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. He was not just performing. He was creating a moment of shared humanity, a connection that would linger long after the last note faded. He began the final section of the piece, allowing the music to soar with emotion. The notes rose and fell like waves, carrying the audience along on a journey of feeling and reflection. He played with precision and passion, every movement intentional, every chord meaningful. The music reflected the entirety of his journey, the struggles, the joys, the quiet moments of triumph, and the unspoken love he carried for his child. It was a performance born from life itself, raw and real, and the audience felt it deeply. The crescendo reached its peak, and the dad played with full expression, allowing the piano to sing with every ounce of emotion he could convey. The hall seemed to vibrate with the power of the performance. Tears streamed down faces, smiles shone, and the audience sat in awe of the depth and sincerity they were witnessing. This was not just music. It was a revelation, a story told through sound, a glimpse into the heart of a man who had lived, loved, and persevered. He gradually began to bring the piece to a close, allowing the melody to soften and the notes to linger. Each sound was measured, deliberate, giving the audience time to absorb the emotion and meaning behind it. The music was like a conversation, a gentle farewell, a final gift of emotion and beauty. He looked at his child, who was glowing with pride and admiration, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had shared something deeply personal, and it had been received with love and understanding. As the last note faded, there was a pause, a collective breath held in awe of what had just occurred. Then, slowly, the audience erupted into applause. It started softly, then grew louder, filling the hall with appreciation, admiration, and emotional release. Some people stood, unable to contain their reaction, while others clapped with tears in their eyes. The dad felt a rush of gratitude, humility, and joy. He had created something extraordinary, a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. Backstage, organizers and performers approached him, their faces filled with astonishment and praise. People from the audience came forward, sharing their amazement, their gratitude, and the emotional impact of the performance. The dad smiled quietly, humbled and touched. He had not performed for recognition, but for the love of music and the desire to share a piece of himself. The reaction of the audience was a gift, a testament to the power of authenticity and emotion. He looked at his child again, holding their hand tightly. Their eyes shone with pride and love, and the dad felt a deep connection that went beyond words. This performance had been for them as much as it had been for the audience, a demonstration of courage, passion, and the beauty of sharing one's heart. The applause continued, echoing through the hall, and the dad knew that this moment would stay with him, his child, and everyone present for a lifetime. The emotional climax of the performance had been reached, and its impact was undeniable. The dad had transformed a simple act of stepping in to fill a gap into a profound experience, touching hearts and inspiring those who witnessed it. Music had become a bridge, a way to communicate, connect, and heal. And in that moment, he realized that sometimes the most powerful expressions come from the heart, unplanned and sincere, leaving a mark that goes beyond the stage and resonates forever. The applause slowly faded, leaving a warm, lingering hum in the hall. The dad sat at the piano for a few moments, letting the impact of his performance sink in. His fingers rested lightly on the keys, still trembling slightly from the rush of emotion. Around him, the audience was still absorbing what they had just witnessed, many quietly wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling softly as they whispered to each other about the unexpected brilliance of the performance. It was a rare kind of silence, one filled with awe, appreciation, and the quiet reverence that follows a truly moving experience. He finally stood, adjusting his posture as he faced the audience. He felt a mixture of relief, pride, and humility. The moment was not about him, really. It was about the connection created, the emotions shared, and the hearts touched. He saw his child running to his side, small hands grasping his, eyes shining with admiration. There were no words between them, only a shared understanding, a bond strengthened by the power of this unexpected, extraordinary moment. The dad smiled down, feeling a warmth in his chest that no applause or praise could fully capture. People began to approach him, one by one, offering congratulations and heartfelt comments. Some spoke of how deeply the music had touched them. Others simply thanked him for sharing such beauty with the room. The dad listened quietly, nodding and smiling, accepting their words with gratitude. Each comment, each expression of emotion, was a reminder that music could truly bridge gaps between people, that it could communicate what words alone often could not. He had always known this privately, but seeing it reflected so clearly in the audience was overwhelming in the best possible way. A few performers who had been waiting backstage came forward as well, applauding him with admiration. They were surprised and inspired, realizing that a single dad, quietly helping with preparations, had just given a performance that left everyone in the hall moved to tears. Some of them asked questions, curious about his experience and how he had maintained such skill despite not performing publicly for so long. He answered softly, with humility, sharing that it had always been a private passion, something that kept him grounded and connected to life through music. The event organizers approached, visibly impressed. They thanked him profusely for stepping in and filling the gap with such authenticity and talent. One of them mentioned how the performance had shifted the entire mood of the event, inspiring not only the audience but also the other performers. It was clear that his act of courage had created a ripple effect, influencing everyone present and leaving a lasting impression. He nodded humbly, not seeking attention, but quietly proud of the way the moment had unfolded. Throughout all of this, his child remained by his side, occasionally looking up at him with wonder. They whispered little remarks of admiration, their eyes wide with amazement at the skill and emotion their parent had displayed. The dad felt a deep sense of connection, realizing that this performance was as much for his child as it had been for the audience. It was a demonstration of perseverance, love, and courage, a lesson in embracing one's talents even in the most unexpected circumstances. As the crowd gradually began to disperse, many lingered, hoping to catch another glimpse of the man who had moved them so profoundly. Some approached quietly, offering kind words or shaking his hand, while others simply sat, reflecting on the emotions they had experienced. The dad felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had shared something meaningful, something that would remain with people long after the event ended. The piano, now still and silent, seemed to hum softly in response, a witness to the heartfelt performance that had just concluded. The dad and his child slowly walked backstage, taking a moment to breathe and relax after the intensity of the performance. He looked down at his child, who was still glowing with pride and admiration. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had not only touched the audience, but had also created a memory that his child would carry forever. It was a moment of connection and love, an experience that reinforced the bond between them and reminded him why he had pursued music in the first place. Backstage, the organizers continued to express their gratitude, emphasizing how the performance had been the highlight of the event. Other performers shared their admiration, inspired by the dad's courage and skill. He accepted their compliments with humility, reminding himself that the true reward was the emotional connection and the impact on those who had listened. This realization brought a quiet sense of peace, a satisfaction that went far beyond recognition or applause. Later, as they left the hall together, the dad reflected on the day. The experience had been unexpected, unplanned, yet it had become one of the most meaningful moments of his life. He had stepped out of his comfort zone, embraced vulnerability, and shared a deeply personal part of himself with others. The response had been overwhelming in the best way, affirming the power of music to communicate, inspire, and heal. He felt grateful not only for the opportunity but for the reminder that genuine expression could leave a lasting mark on the hearts of others. On the way home, he held his child's hand tightly, feeling a quiet contentment. They talked softly about the performance, about how it had made people feel, and about how proud they were of each other. The conversation was filled with warmth, understanding, and reflection. The dad realized that this moment, simple yet extraordinary, had strengthened their relationship, offering a shared experience that would be remembered for a lifetime. The lessons of courage, passion, and authenticity had been shared not just with the audience, but with the person who mattered most in his life. Once home, they settled into the quiet comfort of their apartment. The piano sat in the corner, a silent witness to the day's events. The dad gently ran his fingers over the keys, reliving the melodies that had captivated so many. His child sat nearby, still discussing the performance, and together they reflected on the emotions, the reactions, and the shared joy of the experience. It was a peaceful, reflective moment, one that underscored the beauty of music and the impact of expressing oneself fully and sincerely. In the days that followed, the dad noticed that people from the event continued to talk about the performance. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers shared stories of how the music had moved them, how it had inspired them to pursue their own passions or appreciate the beauty in unexpected moments. The dad felt a quiet pride and satisfaction, not in the attention itself, but in the realization that genuine expression could create lasting impact. He had reminded people of the power of authenticity and the importance of sharing one's talents, even in humble or unassuming ways. Through it all, his child remained his greatest supporter and witness. They often returned to the piano together, playing softly, experimenting with new melodies, and reminiscing about the day. The bond between them deepened, strengthened by the shared experience and the lessons learned. The dad understood that these moments, small and large, were the true treasures of life. The connections made, the emotions shared, and the courage to embrace one's talents fully. The event had come to an end, but its impact continued to ripple through the community. People remembered the single dad who had quietly been tidying the stage and then stepped forward to perform, leaving everyone moved to tears. The story became one of inspiration, a reminder that extraordinary moments can emerge from the simplest circumstances, and that courage, passion, and authenticity can touch hearts in ways that last far beyond the moment itself. And for the dad, the memory remained, a testament to the power of music, love, and human connection.